money is not the goal or the source of your happiness or any of that. It's a tool to do something else that you want with your life. So the FI will come if you master that equation. And then, yeah, hopefully by the time you get there, you don't even really care because you've mastered that whole happiness, time, money trifecta, and you're just cruising along, having a great time, doing exactly what you want.
Hey there, welcome to Coach Carson TV. My name is Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach, and this channel is all about investing in real estate, achieving financial independence, and doing more of what matters. I'm really excited to bring this interview to you with the Mad Fientist, where we're going to talk about the details of financial independence, some of the stuff you'd expect from the Mad Fientist about how to optimize and balance your portfolio and withdrawal rates and things like that. But even more about pursuing your dreams after financial independence and really what's this all about? What does matter to you and why are you trying to save money and build wealth and do this in the first place? So we're going to go through his journey, some of his struggles that he went through as well during his journey. And it's a really honest and open conversation that I hope you enjoy. Hey, Brandon, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me, man. It's good to talk to you. The last time I saw you, it was a whole different world.
I know. I was thinking back, like it felt like 5 years ago when January of 2020, we were in Colorado in a little cabin hanging out with some other friends and the snow coming down. I mean, that really literally seems like ages ago.
A lifetime ago. It's just a whole other, it's crazy. I'm glad we fit that trip in before this all happened, but yeah, just crazy thinking back to it. And yeah, here we are now less than a year later and it's a whole different world.
It is, and you're up in the Highlands, so you're hanging out in a little cabin with with a fire. So that sounds like a good spot to do some podcasting.
Yeah, we're in a self-imposed quarantine just so we can go spend the holidays with family. So we're in the Highlands, just got the wood fire going. Just poured a nice whiskey. You gotta have whiskey when you're in the Highlands of Scotland. So
absolutely,
looking forward to it. Well,
cheers first of all, and. So I've got a lot of questions. I actually put it out on Twitter to get some takes from other people too. But I've got plenty of my own questions that I want to go into with you. And I think what I was interested in, I've kind of divided this into two categories that I want to explore a little bit. The first being, I'm going to put it under the umbrella of life after FI, more the kind of philosophy of why we do this, what's on our mind, what you're up to with creativity and music. I'm really interested in that. And then of course, I know a lot of people have asked about some of the Fientist side of things, some of the math and the numbers and the money. We're going to definitely get into that too. But I want to kick it off with a quote. I just want to get your reaction to this. I noticed that you had an article that you talked about Abraham Maslow, who's like a psychologist from the 20th century. And here's the quote. I just want to get your thoughts on this. It says, "Musicians must make music, artists must paint, Poets must write if they are to be ultimately at peace with themselves. What human beings can be, they must be." What are your thoughts on that one?
I completely agree. And it's interesting looking back on my career. And for people that don't know my story, it was sort of like a race to FI just because I just imagined that once I hit FI, then everything would be great. I'd be happy and life would be rainbows and everything like that. And looking back on my career, which was a great career, like I was a software developer, really enjoyed writing code, still do, had a great workplace, had great colleagues, everything. I'd always blamed the work, but really it was the fact that I wasn't doing what I felt like I should be doing. And that's, like you alluded to it earlier, like releasing an album, it's just been a dream of mine since I was a teenager, just to release one album that I was proud enough of that I'd release. It doesn't matter if anybody listens to it, just if it was good enough for me to put out there, then that would have been me happy. So I think a lot of my dissatisfaction in those career days was all because I wasn't putting in the time to do that. And I always blamed my job for that, but it definitely wasn't my job because I had plenty of time to do other things like travel and watch movies and all sorts of things that we got up to when we were working. And so it wasn't that, it was all internal, and it was all actually my fear that I wouldn't be able to do it, I think, which is only what I realized after spending a few years without a job and still not making progress on that goal, is because I think I was just too terrified to try because I didn't want to lose the dream. So that's where most of my dissatisfaction came. So even though this year's been a complete write-off as far as going out and having fun and seeing friends and family and, doing all the fun things that, we had maybe previously planned, the fact that I was able to get down to work and really make incredible progress on that goal has meant that it's been one of the most rewarding years I've had. So I completely agree with that quote, and I don't know if I've read that quote before. So yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. So, I mean, your story, I think is so informative, and everybody's story is informative, but I love the fact that you, as the Mad Fientist and the website, talking about tax optimization and saving money and all these things that a lot of people got to know you for. But I love the reality and the transparency and the vulnerability you shared on your podcast, on your site about, hey, you know what, like there's a lot of needs we have as human beings. Maslow talks about these different needs we have. We have our basic, we got to put food on the table. We got to make money. Like who thinks about financial independence when you can't even put food on the table? So like that's a need. There's a need for connection and community. There's a need for, just being good at things and kind of going out in the world and contributing a little bit. But then there's this, I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like you got to FI, you had accomplished a lot of these things monetarily. But going back to this quote, you had some unfulfilled, dreams and that you wanted to pursue, to be a musician, to kind of pursue this, and the numbers and the money was sort of getting in the way. It was kind of an excuse for, hey, that's actually what I need to be doing more. And you were even got depressed, after that. And if I were in your, I've had my own moments as well, but it seems like sometimes it's hard to balance all those different needs we have, and you had to kind of have that space in your life to figure out, wait a minute, like it wasn't the money, it was actually me not pursuing these things that are really important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's like, I needed to remove all excuses, because any sort of excuse that could get in the way, I would let it get in the way, and it would always feel productive. Like I've talked about this before, and I don't know if it's the actual term, but it's what I call like productive procrastination. And it's where, like, if you have a final the next day, or you have a paper due, and that's the one time you clean your whole apartment or something in college, because it's like you want to feel productive, but you can't do the hard thing that you really should be doing. And that sort of felt like life. And then, the Mad Fientist actually became a productive way to procrastinate as well. So after I left my job, I was like, all right, good. Now I can finally get down to work with this. But then Mad Fientist started taking off. So then I was like, well, I got to do all these Mad Fientist things. And it really took saying no to everything over the past few years, and getting good at saying no, even to really fun things or really good opportunities. Just saying no to pretty much everything, just so I could focus on this one project that I really needed to focus on. And as you said, like just this unfulfilled thing, like just maybe 2 or 3 days ago, I finally sent off the mixes for mastering, and it's felt like the biggest weight has been lifted off my shoulders that I've just been carrying around since maybe I was a teenager. Because I finally got to the point where I was able to do this thing I've always wanted to do, and it's been an amazing feeling. But it's definitely another level of, like you mentioned, that it's just something that you feel like you have to do, and it's something that just won't die until you do it. And that's definitely been the case for me.
I want to dig into the music side in a minute, because there's a lot of questions I have, and I know other people will be curious about with this album and the music and how this started for you. I want to kind of finish that other thought about, so let's say someone was also pursuing financial independence, which a lot of people are who listen to this, and they hear you say that, you hear me say that, say, wait, don't just put this thing off until financial independence, because that's not going to necessarily make you happy just making money. So what if you wound back the clock 10 years, 7 years, knowing what you know now about this passion that you pursue in music, and also knowing that you wanted to pursue financial independence, is there a different way you would have approached it? Maybe other people could kind of take some of those lessons that you had.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely would have done it differently. There's a lot of things I'm happy that I did. Like we traveled quite a lot over the past decade when we were saving for FI. And now, like with this year with COVID, it's like, wow, we're really glad we took that opportunity. Yeah, we could have just been hermits and hit 5 years earlier, 3 years earlier or something. But I'm glad we did it the way we did it for that reason. And looking back on like my own personal journey, I would have definitely treated it differently because, like I said before, all my hopes were on Phi. That was going to let me do what I wanted to do. But when I hit Phi, then all these other things, all these other challenges came up that I could have been working through while still working, like the self-confidence thing, like, can I really do this? And then developing the musical skills and the production skills and all the things that you need to do to actually produce an album. Those are all these things that I could have been doing as I was working. So, I have a draft article that I've been planning to write for years, and I'm hoping I'll eventually do it. But it sort of talks about like mastery versus goals, and how goals aren't really ideal, especially for people who are Phi or pursuing Phi, because we have a whole lifetime, hopefully a long, happy lifetime ahead of us of pursuing things, and goals sort of have a finality to them, which is why I'm sort of a little bit worried about this album, because it is such a big goal and it is like a thing and a finality to it, which I'm hoping I just transition into mastery outlook and ideas. But anyway, so I have this article where I'm going to talk about that, and I really think that maybe the pursuit of Phi, it shouldn't be the focus on Phi. It should be mastering your relationship with time and money. And Phi hopefully will become a byproduct of that at some point. But if you master that relationship along the way, then by the time you get there, it won't matter anyway, because you're either doing work that you love, or you've cut back so much that it's not really impacting your life, or it's providing a nice balance to all the fun stuff that you have planned or wanted to do in Phi. So if I was going to do it differently, I would definitely not focus on the end goal as much. And I would instead try to remove the time sucks from my life that were getting in the way potentially. Because when people say they don't have time, it usually means that they just aren't prioritizing that thing. Because if you have time to surf the internet or watch TV or, any of those things, then you probably have time to do what you really should be or wanting to do. So I think I would have reframed it all. I would have figured, okay, how can we live this happy life now, testing things, seeing where spending money helps us, where it doesn't, and then eliminating all the waste and inefficiencies, obviously, but using the time that I free up from that process to then do some of these other things. So yeah, less on the end goal of Phi, and less thinking like, oh, this is going to solve all my problems, and more like, okay, this is a lifelong mastery of money and time, which I'm still going through now. Like, we are still trying to think like, what's important to us? How do we want to spend our money? How do we want to spend our time? It constantly changes. I know I talk to you about real estate all the time, and our thoughts on that constantly change, and it's trying to figure that stuff out. So yeah, I think if you just instead focus on, all right, being conscious of it, because a lot of the spending that happens that's wasteful is just unconscious, like, just natural instinct spending that maybe you actually don't get much value out of. So being like aware of where your money's going is important, but yeah, maybe I would take a lot of pressure off that final end goal to solve all my problems. And would instead just be like, okay, this is a lifelong thing. I'm going to master my life in how it relates to money and time, and try to optimize for those variables.
I really love that idea. I totally resonate with the idea of mastery and having these categories of mastery in your life, not just one, perhaps, money being one. For me, parenting, which is my most difficult job and the one I'm probably not the best at, is like, all right, I got a lot of work to go in the parenting area. But then also real estate investing for me is a path of mastery. And actually, it wasn't something I got into like thinking, oh, this is like my life's purpose to be a real estate investor. Like, it totally wasn't. I was like, all right, I'm just going to do this thing, make some money, kind of like you were talking about. Then I'll go do other things in my life after that. But I think what I'm finding, at least, is that you start dipping your toe in different ideas. For you, it's been music, it's been, coding, it's been money. For me, it's also been, money and financial and real estate investing and teaching. Teaching's actually been one that for me is like, when I look at it, when I start learning about it, all the different ways of communicating and sharing ideas, I'm like, wow, if it really captures your attention and your passion, and you're like, I would love to, if you find yourself reading about it and watching YouTube videos about it in your spare time just because you're interested in it, like my wife always jokes with me, like, why are you reading about like money and like the history of monetary policy? I'm like, or like, why are you reading about urban planning and why cities are, it's like, it's 11 o'clock at night and you're reading this. I was like, sorry, I'm just interested in it. She's just joking with me, but I think that's, at least for me, that's like the compass is like, what are you naturally doing anyway? And then if you're pre-fi, like just build that into your life. Like don't wait to fi and to be a musician. Don't wait till fi to be a teacher. Don't wait, start doing those things with whatever time you have, whether that's 20 minutes, 2 hours. There's got to be, like I love how you said, if you're watching TV and internet surfing, you could carve out 2 hours a day probably. And instead of just justifying that with that's entertainment, that makes me relax, say, well, there's something else that can make you relax, some other kind of thing you can learn and have fun with. That's what I don't know about you. I enjoy just kind of learning about random stuff. So
absolutely,
that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, sort of sculpting your life using what you learn from that, because something I've learned over the last 10 years is we're terrible at knowing what actually does make us happy. And the only way I've been able to figure it out is just by trying stuff and switching out things and experimenting. So if you find yourself doing that and you find yourself liking something, then, maybe your high paying job that you hate would be worth swapping for another job that pays half that, but you're going to be happier. And it's sort of that idea. Whereas when I was saving, I was like, no, it's all about the numbers. So I'm maximizing for the number. I'll deal with the happiness thing when I hit that final fine number. And I think that was the big mistake.
So I want to talk about music, and you wrote an article about sort of this dichotomy you had in your own mind. You're a great coder, you're math and science, you're good at that. You kind of own that path of mastery. You got a graduate degree in that, I believe. But you also had this, we've talked about it, this nagging kind of impulse. I'm a musician. I'm just curious because you've got this album out, which I'm going to link to in the show description so everybody can see it. I bought the album, pre-ordered. When does it actually come out, just so everybody can know?
January 22nd.
All right, January 22nd.
January 22nd. So yeah, super excited.
This will be coming out early January, so people can go ahead and get that pre-order. I've already done that as well. I want to go all the way back. Like, what's the origin of this love of music? Where did this come from?
Yeah, I think it's been since I was a little kid. I got pictures of me as like a 2-year-old wearing a tube sock on my hand because I was doing Michael Jackson's Billie Jean dances and I didn't have a sparkly sequin glove, so I used a good old 80s tube sock. But then it sort of really exploded in my teenagers year, or actually preteen years. I got really into like the grunge scene. Obviously Nirvana was huge at the time, and Kurt Cobain was my idol. And then I started, the friends I hung out with, like music was the common thing. So my best friend in middle school, I don't know where he found all these amazing bands to listen to. I think he listened to college radio or something, but he listened to all these like really weird indie noise rock bands, and that sort of led to like getting into like Sonic Youth and Polvo and Brainiac and things like that. And he actually went on to become a proper rock star, which is crazy. He went on to be a act called Girl Talk, and he ended up touring the whole country. And he's still doing music today. So
wow.
So he's the one that introduced me to like all these like really cool bands. And then just from there it just took off, and it was just like such an important part of my life. And then like being just a awkward introverted teenager, falling back on some like really good music that's either like really angry and heavy or like really melancholy and moody. It just always was something that really interested me. And I played guitar since I was 10. So that was always a big thing too. And then I started getting into like synthesizers and things in later years. But I don't know. It's just one of those things that's like I'll be in the car with my wife and like I'll be like, oh, you gotta listen out to this bass line part. And it's just one of these things where I guess you just really appreciate something, just like a good cook would maybe like really notice like subtle nuanced flavors. I don't know. It's just always been such a big part of my life that I just really appreciate really good music and different music. I just always, and that's why it's always just been such a nagging desire to be part of that because I've always just been a consumer. And as you know, producing podcasts and having a blog and stuff, like being a producer of something is way more fun. Yeah, it's scarier and it's a lot harder and it's a lot more work, but it's just so much more rewarding than just being a consumer of stuff. And here I am with this medium that I just love so much, and yet I've been too scared to try to, create my own stuff. So I think that's why it's just something that never died. But yeah, I would just say that music has just been a huge part of my life since before I can even remember. So it's just grown from there.
So it started with a passion, started with just you immerse yourself for like we all do in life with music, and then at some point you said, "Hey, I want to make this." And in particular, like I've got a playlist that you shared on your website, which if you're okay with that, I'll share the Spotify playlist in the show description as well, so people can see just some of the influences and different types of music. It gets out there, right? It's like some cool like crazy synth music, which I'm starting to dig. But the transition to synth music in particular, and maybe explain to people what that is if they're like never heard of this and don't know what it's all about.
Sure. Yeah. No, there's some weird bands on there, and like that's the thing. Like my idols like have like 130 followers on Spotify and stuff. Like these, like my ambitions are not huge, and that's why it always drove me crazy. I'm like, it's not like I'm thinking I'm going to be like a pop star or anything. Like the bands I love so much, like I'd go to see their shows and it'd be like 20 people in there, and and to me that's like the pinnacle of success, just because they were so cool. So yeah, so a lot of the stuff that I've really enjoyed maybe since college, I would say, is like synthesizer based stuff, because it's like synthesizers are just like amazing like feats of engineering that are super cool, and you're just turning electricity into all these crazy sounds. But the style of music that I've been really enjoying is like a lot dancier stuff. You're a Clemson guy, so I don't know if you've ever been up to Chapel Hill's Cat's Cradle. It's a venue in Carrboro, North Carolina, which isn't miles too far away from Clemson, I guess. Yeah. But that's where all like the good little bands go and stuff. But I went and saw a show there in college, and it was a band called The Faint, and they were just so energetic, and it was like the biggest, best dance party I've ever been to in my life. And just during that, I was like, everyone here is just so happy. Like, imagine making this many people this happy. Because you can't be sad when you're dancing, I don't think, unless you're just like shoegaze stuff, I guess. I don't know. And I was just like, that would be so amazing just to get on stage with a bunch of your buddies and just make this type of like super energetic dancing music and have all these people just have like the best night of their lives. So that was like the huge turning point where I was like, I love this whole style of music. I love the synthesizers. I love everything about this. So because before that, it was like really experimental, like noise, atonal, like out of tune sounding guitars and stuff. And I think my wife, for one, is happy that I sort of veered in the synth direction and not the noise weird direction. She's smiling on the couch across from me, so I think she agrees.
Hi, Jill. Hello.
He says hi. She says hi.
No, I mean, dancing, I don't talk about this either, but like, yeah, going somewhere where music really runs away with you and you can just dance and enjoy it. And I mean, gosh, I can't think of anything better than that. And so now you're on the other side of the synth board. You're the one making it. You're the one creating it. And, I'd have to think though, like this is my little creative stuff of putting a book out and making a podcast. Like I think compared to music, I think there's just a different level of vulnerability when you put yourself creatively out there. So like, I totally would imagine this is as passionate and interesting and fun as it is to put it out there. It's also like, it would terrify me to death. So I don't know, is that a reality when you're putting music out in the world?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And like a Mad Fientist article, actually Mad Fientist has taught me a lot about that and helped with this whole process, just because one, I'll be working on an article or something. I'll be like, this is amazing. This is going to be the best thing ever. It's so, nobody's really thought about this before. It's so good. It's really helpful. Mm-hmm. I'll put it out and it'll be like, yeah, it'll be a good response, but it won't be amazing. And then I'll do this other article where I'll have Jill read it the night before. And I'm like, this is stupid. I'm not even going to put it out. It doesn't even say anything. And it's those articles that go crazy. Yep. So that taught me, one, you can't really judge your own stuff, which helped with this project too,
Yeah.
because I'm like, oh, I don't know, is it good enough? And I'm like, I feel like there's some quote out there where it's like you can't judge, the artist can't judge his own art or her own art or something like that. I don't know who said it or if it is even a quote, but I'm pretty sure it is. And
Yeah, it makes sense.
it's not your job to judge it. So that helped, and also just getting used to putting yourself out there has been really helpful too. Just because I know the same cycle I go through. I was just talking to a Mad Fientist reader through email about this, and it's like I no matter what I'm creating and publishing, it goes through like the same sort of steps. Like first, I get the idea and I'm super excited about it. I'm just like thrilled. I can't wait to do it. Then two, I get overwhelmed because I realize how much work's involved in actually doing what I planned, or the idea is easy, the execution's hard.
Yep.
Three, I get to the stage where it's almost done, but then I start overanalyzing every single minute detail and trying to perfect every little small tiny thing, which then inevitably leads to me hating the whole thing because I'm like so deep into like the detail that I just miss the bigger point. And I'm like, this is awful. I'm not even going to put this out. But then I get so sick of looking at the details that I just publish it, and I'm like, forget it. I just want this out of my life.
Yep.
And then there's always this come down afterwards, because I don't know if it's like, I'm not sure what people will think of it, or I'm not sure if like it's just like the release of having been so focused, but it's always like this like post funk I get in after publishing. And then like 3 months later, I'll read what I did or listen to what I did or something. I'll be like, wow, that was really good. And I'll like it again. So knowing that that's my sort of process, I guess, has helped with this, because there were some real low points where I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm 38. Like, I'm not a musician. What am I going to go on tour and just like be drinking beers every night? Or like, I'm too old for this. I don't even really want this. This is just like a lingering teenage dream that I just have kept with me. It's stupid.
Yeah.
And then obviously all the self-doubts things, like, is this even a song? Like, I don't know how many times I asked Jill and my brother, he was helping me along the way, just like listening to stuff for me. And I'm like, is this even a song? Like, I'm going to send this away to get mastered, and they're going to call me back and be like, these aren't songs. I can't do anything with this. So working through that has been a lot easier, just because I've, had to push through a lot of that with Mad Fientist. And the more you push through it, the easier it becomes, because you're used to it and you realize it's just your brain trying to protect your fragile little ego, I guess. And it's just easier to push through. And the one quote that seems to be getting me through a lot of things in my life over the past few years, as I've pushed out more and more stuff, is like, I'll be at a position where I'm in one of these self-doubt zones, and I'm always just like, all right, there's two worlds. There's the world where I don't push this out and publish it, and there's the world that I do. And it's every time I say that to myself, it's like, well, I know what the world feels like where I don't. Like, that's just yesterday, that's the day before.
Yep.
But I don't know what it's going to be like if I push this out, and that's exciting, and that makes me want to do it. And that's just that simple phrase. I've said it a lot of times. My brother was over in Scotland, and we decided to go take a few synthesizers into the park and put on a concert that nobody asked for. And we got dressed up with all this like glowing like blacklight paint, and had synths down there. And like, people were walking home from work on a Monday night, and here's these two idiots with black lights and a boombox that has all these synthesizers linked up to it. And it felt ridiculous. But then I was like, well, there's two worlds. There's one where we don't do this, and there's one where we do. And I was like, I want to live in the world that we do. And I'm every time I do, I'm glad I did it. I've never regretted it so far.
I love that. I can just imagine that. And it goes back to another Maslow quote, the guy we started this whole thing with, he that I always resonate with. He's like, every moment is an opportunity to step forward into growth or to back into comfort. Like the comfortable thing. And I have to get over this myself all the time, because speaking in front of people and talking might seem a little natural now, but man, it was terrifying. Start doing it. But every time you do that thing, like your music, getting out there and doing that impromptu concert, when like it's much more comfortable to go back in the house and not do this. It could be embarrassing. This thing could like flop completely. But if you didn't do it, you'd be going into comfort and you would never grow. And it's totally okay to screw up. Like that's what's so, I watch my daughters, they're both taking music lessons and doing a lot more music than I did growing up. Like I was in choir and I sang, but they've really resonated with it. And we've just, when you have kids, you just kind of fan the flame of whatever they're interested in. And I'll see that they'll make mistakes, and it happens so like effortlessly and they quickly, and watching them learn languages has been the same way. I don't know if I think it's just the older we get so much self-criticism when we make a mistake that we forget, like, that's how we learn. That's how we master anything. Like, we always make mistakes. It's just make it quickly, get uncomfortable, do the thing that makes you look stupid, keep moving forward.
Absolutely. And you mentioned comfort there, and that's something that's interesting to think about post-Fi a lot, because that was a big shock for me personally, because my whole life has been driven by money. Like every decision's like, okay, I'll major in this because that seems like it's going to get a good job, and I'll work hard in high school so that I get into good college so that I can major in that to get the good job and make a bunch of money. So then when that wasn't a motivating factor anymore, it's all internal to make yourself do those things, because when you have a job, you sometimes are forced into not being comfortable because it's part of your job. And yeah, you have to give a presentation to your team, and you have to because your boss said to. But when you're fine, nobody's telling you what to do, and you don't really have to do anything anymore. It then takes on a whole new level of self-motivation that I wasn't expecting. And that's, again, going back to what I said earlier, how if you're trying to force yourself to do these things earlier before you hit Fi, that's going to be way better, because when you don't have to work for money, or you don't have to do anything because you don't have to make another dollar, then it all boils down to you having to force yourself to do that. And that's definitely a skill that you have to practice and get better at, because it's tough. So the comfort thing is, like, this has been a very uncomfortable year for me. But I've already started trying to think of how future years I can do that more, because I can feel myself as I'm getting older, like, I'm liking comfort. Like, I'm glad we went to live in China when I was in my 20s, because thinking about like living in rural, well, not it was urban China, but very non-Western urban China. Yeah. Thinking back to, like, I don't think I could do that now. I'm too soft.
Right.
And I don't want to get too super soft, because as you said, like, you're not growing if you're comfortable. So yeah, forcing yourself to be uncomfortable post-Fi is a skill, and that you have to get better at. And that's why you should start doing those uncomfortable things when you're still working, I'd say.
One particular tool, and by the way, so many of Brandon's podcasts, if you guys haven't listened to his, like, you've had some amazing guests. I'm so jealous. Some of the guests you've had in the last couple of years, James Clear and Cal Newport, and
you. When were you on?
I was on there. I was on there. I don't know how you fit me. I don't know how I talked you into, like, fitting me in between these other people. But
no, you're a great guest, man. Yeah, no, but yeah, thank you.
In any case, like, one of them that I in particular was really impactful on me. All of them were, but was when you interviewed Scott Young with Ultra Learning. Was just a fascinating. It's a book that I've ordered now, and I can't believe I hadn't read it yet. But just all of you, go listen. I'm gonna link to it. But I want to talk about your own Ultra Learning experiment. This will be a good transition back to the financial stuff as well. Is that you had this music goal? It was a really, I imagine, was like intimidating to say, I'm going to become a musician. Here I go. And you were stuck and you're procrastinating. And Scott kind of helped you through an experiment you did in 2019 for 3 months. And so I was hoping you could just talk a little bit about, what Ultra Learning is, and how, because learning is such a fascinating thing for me too. It's a big part of my post-Fi life, is just learning. So talk about that experiment and what Ultra Learning kind of helped you, how that helped you get over the hump with your music goals.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the turning point. So yeah, as you mentioned, that was last year. And we were planning a big trip on the big trip that I saw you on when we were back in the States, and we went to the mountains and did a bunch of skiing and stuff. And I knew that was coming. We were going to come over to the States in December. And yeah, I interviewed Scott maybe in August or something like that. And I was like, all right, I got 3 months lined up. We have no travel plans. We have nothing. And I'm so sick of not making progress on this project that I've been talking about for years and thinking about for decades. And I was like, I'm going to read his book. Then I'm going to get him on the podcast and just ask him all the questions that I want to know, selfishly. And I'm just going to design this ultra learning project. And hopefully, I was always looking for like the magic bullet. Like it was always like, oh, if I read this inspirational article, that's going to get me over this hump. Or if I read this book, or it was always that. And the reason ultra learning was so impactful to me is because it just made me put the hours in and do the work. And it boiled down, like I used a lot of the stuff he talked about in the book to like come up with the important key things that I needed to learn how to do, and then just did more of those. So rather than watching a YouTube video on mastering an album when I hadn't even written a song that I was wanting to mix, it was ridiculous. But that's what I used to waste my time doing, is like, well, I need to learn that eventually, so I'll just learn that now. And whereas ultra learning really focused me, and the only thing that I like, the only goal of that was to put in 25 hours a week of music stuff and hopefully make that the most impactful activities I could during those 25 hours. So I created a spreadsheet because I just have spreadsheets for everything. But each column was like a certain task, and I arranged them most important on the left and least important on the right. And then I just filled in the cells every day, just putting in how many minutes I did each of those activities. And I always tried to be as far left as I could. But obviously, like, sometimes you just lost all your creative reserves, or you lost all your motivation or willpower. So I had backup stuff to fill in those gaps, but I always try to start with like the most important thing. And one of the concepts he talks about is directness. And he's like, so if you want to be a painter, then you need to spend most of your time painting.
Painting.
And if you want to be doing the thing, not, reading about color theory is probably important and things like that. But the most important thing is painting, because when you need the color theory, you can go look into that and things like that. So for me, that was just writing songs, even if they're terrible, and a lot of them were. It was just sitting down and putting in the work. So I think committing to that 3-month block where I took everything else off my plate, no Mad Fientist stuff, no trips, no social engagements, nothing. And I was like, I'm just going to see how it goes for 3 months. And maybe about 2 months into that, I wrote a song that I thought, hey, that's the style of music I want to write. Finally, it's and I think it's good enough to keep working on.
That was Atom Smasher, right?
Yeah, it was.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that was it's on the album. So, and that was the start of it, because that was the change from, I can't do this. There's no way I can do this. I don't have what it takes to do this. That was my brain. I was a math and science guy, as you said before, and I was like, just my brain doesn't do art stuff, creative stuff. And that helped me get over that, because I did the one, and I was like, well, if I can do one, then I can do some others. And that was the turning point. But I think it just boiled down to forcing myself to put in the hours. And that's something that really came in handy for the last song on the album. So I had written 7, and 7 is technically an album. So I was like, I can put that out.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to make it 8, just in case they change the rules and 7's no longer an album or something. So that was October this year. That's the only thing on my to-do list of October of this year was like, okay, I'm going to write the 8th song for the album. And all the previous 7 ones felt magical, and like, I don't know where they came from. I'm surprised they happened. I was convinced I would never be able to do it again. But having learned from not only the ultra learning experiment, the 3 months I did that, but for the rest of the time this year, I was able to just not be overwhelmed by it, which definitely would have happened last year. I would have just been overwhelmed by the task, and then I would have procrastinated, or productively procrastinated on Mad Fientist stuff or something. But instead, I was just able to say, all I have to do is put in the hours, and hopefully, learning from the past, a song will come out of that potentially. But the only focus should be putting in those hours. And sure enough, I put in tons of hours during October, and it was only near the end of October that the seed of a song started to form. And then by the end of the month, I had a full-fledged demo that is now the last song on the album. And that was that was huge for me because it just showed like, okay, you just focus on the work and then the outcome will hopefully happen eventually if you just keep working hard and focusing on the right things.
And what I love about that lesson, that this is so applicable to so many things. Like if you can learn this skill, he learned it with Brandon learned it with an album and making music, but this applies. This is the exact process I try to help people with real estate investing too. It's just this big overwhelming thing to invest in real estate. And then you listen to all these podcasts and read these books and it overwhelms you even more. And you're like, I can't do this. Like this is intimidating. And so just what I try to do is just like get people, here is like 3 months, focus, do these things, put in the time, make yourself a schedule, and then kind of avoid the result syndrome of like, I'm going to get a result. Like, don't worry about buying a deal. Don't worry about doing any of that, because that's the irony of it is that if you put in the time and stop focusing on the results and just focus on the process and the mastery, then the results, I mean, you don't know when they're going to come. A lot of that's out of your hands. The market could change, your own life could change, but the thing you can control, which I love, you demonstrated this, is putting in the hours. And if you do that, then it kind of tricks your brain into just saying, okay, you're a musician. Okay, you're a real estate investor. Because you're putting in the hours, you must be a real estate investor, a musician. And then the end result is you get better at it. You have mastery, and naturally results come from that.
That's it. And the changing your identity thing is so key too, because we tell ourselves these stories, and I'm not that story I told myself, I'm not a creative guy. But yeah, when you're spending 25 hours a week writing music, then you believe pretty quickly that you are a musician. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And that's key to giving you the confidence to make decisions and eventually then push stuff out to the other people. So that's a great point, is the identity switch that comes from that. Consistent work is really important to actually reaching your goal. But if you focus on that end goal, like you said, it makes it a lot harder and a lot scarier, and you're a lot more tentative, I think, with your decision making potentially.
Right. Well, I'm going to make a hard turn here because we have a little bit more time left and transition. But I want to talk about kind of the practical reality of living post-FI. And this is something you and I both kind of in different ways, because we have different approaches to some of our asset allocations and things. But I want you, if you don't mind, talking a little bit about, you left your job, which you had a salary. A lot of people can resonate with, appreciate that. That's where you pay your bills. So you left your job. What does your portfolio look like? I think you wrote an article recently about that allows you to have the confidence to say, I've got enough money to live this financial independence. Maybe that's just a good, simple place, just a good, simple question to ask.
Yeah, sure. As you mentioned, I did maybe, I don't know, a few months ago, I wrote a post just detailing my whole portfolio. So that it's all stocks. I got about 10 to 12% bonds. I'm actually sitting, so that of the actual portfolio, it's, 88% stocks and 12% bonds. But outside of that portfolio, I'm probably still sitting on, I don't know, 15 to 20% cash out of the total net worth. And that's because we're thinking of buying a house, which I've talked to you about in the past. And it's actually looking like it's going to be happening, which is going to make me feel a lot better, actually, because obviously March was really scary. And since the 5 portfolio of, the 88-12 split that I talked about could cover our expenses, I didn't want to put this other cash into the market too. And I thought, like, all right, if I put it into a house, then even if things go really bad for a decade, at least we'll have somewhere where we can live. Yeah. And that's fine. And it just would make me feel a little bit more diversified. And then now, since the markets have increased so much, then that 5 portfolio is more than we would spend just taking a very conservative withdrawal rate. So for the stock side of things, I'm about 72% US and 28% international. and there's not too much amazing, brilliant thinking going into that. I just looked at a few like efficiency graphs of the various allocations you could have, and that one looked like a good maximization of returns versus volatility.
Right.
And that's it really. They're all low cost index funds. They're some split between Fidelity and Vanguard, just because my old workplace stuff was at Fidelity, and it's fine. It's low cost, and just I've been too lazy to consolidate it. And I'm in no real need to, because like I said, they're low cost, just as low cost as the Vanguard stuff. But that's it. So that's nothing fancy, and it's just a matter of I was just pumping as much in as I could, and then lots of obviously like tax advantage accounts and things like that, because I was really big into that when I was working. But to answer your question, as far as how we had the confidence to do it, we actually haven't even tapped into it, because my wife's still working. She's in healthcare and she loves it, so she's still working. But then the Mad Fientist, ironically, took off after I left. So we haven't had to tap into it. So that's why I always like to caveat any sort of talk about, how do you feel about these withdrawal strategies with, well, I don't know. Theoretically, I can talk about them, but I haven't had to implement them. And I think that's important, because obviously I feel a lot calmer, especially in times like March, although the income completely dropped for most of this year from that, because all the ways the Mad Fientist brings in income, those companies got freaked out and just stopped doing any sort of affiliate relationships. But again, we don't rely on that money, so it wasn't a big deal. But it still was enough to not feel like I was having to really take out a bunch of money from a down portfolio. So I think it's important to clarify that. But yeah, that the theory is that just taking I think 3.5% would have been my target withdrawal rate, because it's probably as conservative as you need to be based on historical market performance. But yeah, that was always the idea, but haven't actually executed yet.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll link to some of your articles on withdrawal rates, which I do think are great. So if people, and a lot of my listeners some are all in on real estate. A lot of others are kind of 50-50, or they're kind of dabbling in real estate and they have a lot of stocks. So I think this conversation of asset allocation between different things, like you mentioned, real estate, stocks, and also businesses, which, I think I've always been kind of come from the business standpoint, where real estate is really kind of a quasi business investment. It's got qualities of both, but I've always looked at it as building up income streams, stacking those up. And then real estate has a kind of unique quality of a business that is pretty easy to outsource the management of it. So, whereas a lot of side hustles and things, you're going to have to be involved in it. Real estate, when I was in Ecuador for a year and a half, I was 30 minutes a week, 1 hour per week, kind of managing the manager. So that, I've kind of taken, if you think about the 3 pillars of, well, let's see. Yeah. You got your kind of paper assets, and then you got real estate, and then you have businesses. Real estate has been my main thing. And then I have, over the long term for me, I want to increase allocation to stocks and index funds. And that's kind of, I'm underrepresented there, but I haven't been too worried about it, because as long as I'm finding opportunities and reducing my risk in other places. So I guess my point is just there's different approaches here, but the thing I'm seeing that I'd like your comment on too is, this idea of getting a kind of an accidental side business with a Mad Fientist. And I've just noticed this pattern over and over again, especially people who are younger, who've retired early or left their job, depending just on a withdrawal rate of 3.5%, I personally would not feel, even if the math works out, like I think it makes sense to have these backup plans, like having a little bit of, even a business that makes 20 grand a year, think about how much wealth you'd have to accumulate to do that. So I think you've demonstrated, and I'm kind of trying to do the same thing, that most people who have to depend on their assets the rest of their life don't go all in on any one thing. Like there's always like a diversification impulse, I think. And it seems like that's kind of been whether by accident with Mad Fientist or other ways, you're kind of following that same impulse.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like you mentioned, you're wanting to get more stocks. I'm wanting to get more real estate just to balance it out even further. And yeah, just diversification is good for a reason. And especially, when you've made enough that you can sustain yourself, then it's more about preserving that than just hitting another grand slam home run or something. So,
Right.
so for me, I imagine my money would be better off in the markets, but the peace of mind of having a roof over my head that I know is going to be there with whether the markets are down or up is also
Yep.
worthwhile too. So that's why it's like, okay, I'll maybe diversify a little bit more than to.
Yeah. And it allows you to do it. There's a trick that you talked about. You're really big on, and I appreciate the behavior, like recognizing that we're all emotional beings, and that as investors, we're going to get in our own way, and we're going to screw stuff up if we just depend on our own kind of judgment. And so I like how you allocate you have a certain allocation percentage. So you mentioned stocks are 90%. And then bonds are 10%, and then within the stocks, you're 70% or 25% and 75%. It's the cool thing about that, and you can do this with real estate too. Like, all right, let's say you wanted to be like Carl at 1500 Days and Mindy. They're about 50-50 real estate stocks. If you have some kind of percentage like that, and you choose, I mean, you can read about what percentage that is, but as long as you just say, my goal is to maintain that percentage of asset allocation, it takes away like when markets go down like a roller coaster, you have a decision to do. So maybe you could talk about that, like this past March when the market went down. How did you having that kind of fixed asset allocation help you avoid the impulse that most of us have to, I got to get out of the market, or I got to try to time it and get it in the right time? Like, what did you do instead?
Yeah, so I invested during 2008, and I made mistakes then. Luckily, they were small because I didn't have much money in the markets then. But we had just sold a house that we had bought and did up in Scotland for 2.5 years, which I didn't realize it, but it was a live and flip, I guess you would call it now.
Yeah.
But we bought it, did it up for 2.5 years as we lived there, sold it for 50% more than we bought it for in 2007. We sold it in 2007 just as Northern Rock, there was a bank run at Northern Rock, and like the financial world was starting to feel a little shaky. So luckily we closed and we had this big chunk of cash, and we invested half in Scotland, and then we brought the other chunk over to the States, and I was investing that. So I put some money into the markets, and then they tanked, and I was like, oh, I'll put a little more in. And then it tanked again, and I put less in, and then it tanked even more, and then I put less in. And when it bottomed out eventually, I was only putting in like $150 a day. And I remember because I was at my grandparents' house, and I was going to put my 150 in, because why would I put more in? Because it was just kept going down. I wanted cheaper, and it didn't go down that day. And I was like, oh, I'll just wait to put it in tomorrow. And it never ended up going any lower than that. And I, like, looking back kind of now, it's like that was like the investment opportunity in my lifetime. And there I was sitting on cash, and I didn't invest it because I was trying to time the absolute bottom of the market. So when things started going wrong this year, I was like, okay, I need a better plan. Because as you said, like, once you do this enough, you know yourself and you know where you're going to stumble. And I knew I would stumble in the same way because I would be trying to get the best deal. So at the time, I still had about, maybe even more, 20 to 25% in cash, maybe, which at that time felt way too much. And that was because the unexpected Mad Fientist income was coming in, and I had already gone cash heavy before quitting my job because I thought I was going to live on that money. So anyway, I was in too much cash, and I didn't have the plan to buy real estate. So I couldn't even justify it to myself to have that cash because I was saving for a house or something. So when it started going down, I was like, okay, I need to deploy this cash in the best way possible. So rather than make the mistake of doing lower amounts as the market went down, I had a plan at each 5% increment, and I would double the investment each time, or not exactly. I think I started at 1x, and then I did 1.5x, then 2x, then 3x, then 3x, then 3x, because I didn't know if it would get to those other 3x's. So it started at like 15% off the highs, and then at 20% it was 1.5x, and then 25% it was 2x, and then 30% it was 3x. And so I had the spreadsheet. It had it all laid out. Like, here's how much money I could invest. Here's how much bonds I have in case it like really goes crazy and I would just want to sell bonds and go into stocks. And I had it all laid out. And for the most part, it worked great. when markets went down 35% on the day that it actually bottomed, I'd gotten so used to. So what I would do is I would set up a limit order, and so since I'm in the UK, I'd be up well before the markets were up. So I'd be like, I'd look at my spreadsheet. I'd be like, okay, if VTI gets down to this number, that's me down 30%. So at that level, I have to do 3x the initial amount. So I put a limit order and said, if VTI gets below that, buy this amount at that price. But the markets were falling so quickly that I got so used to waking up, putting in that limit order, and then getting it fulfilled at a much lower price because it would open and tank. So even though I'd say, all right, I want to buy this amount at say 70 or whatever,
Yeah.
I'd log in sometime later in the day and I'd see I'd get it for 68 because on open it just tanked and I got fulfilled at a lower price. So anyway, so I got so used to getting these extra bargains that even though it hit my negative 35% target, I was like, I'll just buy it tomorrow morning and hope that I get even better price. And then of course it went up whatever 10% the next day.
Yep.
And that was the bottom of this whole cycle. So again, my brain got in the way, even though I thought I came up with this foolproof automated system. So that taught me that in future, I need to just put these orders in all at once. Don't think about it again. If they hit, then the buys happen.
Yep.
So anyway, so I ended up deploying maybe just over half my cash that I had available. And like I said, I was planning for potentially negative 40, negative 45, and maybe even negative 50 because we saw that in 2008.
Right.
So it was surprising that negative 35 was as low as it went, considering all the economies in the world were shut down for.
Surprising.
It's crazy. So that's a great lesson that you just have no idea what's going to happen.
Yep.
And just having rules in place. And something that I came up with while I was doing this was having sort of boundaries. So like I created a whole new spreadsheet where I have like my most bearish portfolio, my most bullish portfolio, my ideal portfolio. And then that way, even if I feel really scared or really greedy, I know I'm only going to be within these bounds that are still good.
Yep.
So it's going to keep me from doing anything stupid, but it's also going to make me feel like I have some control. Right. And like, I'm scared. I feel like the markets are going to tank. Yep. I'm just going to target my bearish allocation and I'll stick with that until I feel differently. But even doing that, I know I'm not like being fearful and selling at the wrong time and things like that.
Yeah, I love that. Just having these tricks, knowing yourself, but then giving yourself these limits. Because when things change, we're scared. We feel like we have to do something. We're out of control. And so knowing that, hey, I could be 0 to 10% bonds and then this much, and it gives you some flexibility. And the same with real estate, too. Like real estate's a little harder to get in and out of, which I actually think is one of the psychological benefits of real estate is that you can't just go be stupid and just press the button and sell. Yeah. So you don't have to be quite as disciplined with real estate because the times you want to sell, you're like, nobody's buying. I guess I'll just have to figure out how to rent this house out.
Yeah. So absolutely.
It turns out being a psychological benefit to be illiquid. But you got to know your asset class, and so definitely check Brandon's article out on his portfolio allocation. I'm going to link to that in the show notes. The lesson, the takeaway, whatever you're investing in, is you gotta create some systems, some rules for yourself, and then you're gonna want to get off those rules. You're not gonna want to stick to them. But the best people, like I'm definitely not there. But when you study like Warren Buffett or some of it's not that they are like brilliant mathematicians, although he is. It's more that they have just like this willpower of like, rock willpower that they just stick to their guns. They stick to their guns when it doesn't matter how hard it is. And so, just getting out of the impulse to sell when it's at the wrong times or buy at the wrong times. That's something that gets a lot of people in trouble.
Absolutely. And yeah, and like I said before, like I thought I had figured it all out this time, but then I found a new way to screw myself up. So hopefully for the next time, if you recognize those things, then you can try to fix them for the next time. Right. And like, as you said, yeah, having systems is key. And then automating as much as you can is also very important, at least for me, who does tend to sabotage things.
Spreadsheets here, spreadsheet nerds to the rescue. That's us.
Yeah.
That's me as well. Cool. Well, Brandon, I really appreciate it. We've gone over our hour a little bit. Fun talking, but this has been so cool, and really appreciate you talking.
I appreciate you having me on. This has been loads of fun, and just sitting by the fire, having a whiskey, and talking to an old buddy. This is great.
If I weren't 7 hours behind, I would be having that whiskey right there with you. I got to drive around a little bit early. But hey, I want to close, Brandon, with kind of go pull a financial independence podcast question for you at the end, and say, for those who are pursuing financial independence, they're listening to this, they're saying, hey, one of these days I want to deal with some of these same things Chad and Brandon have been talking about. Do you have any final tips or just kind of best idea that you could share with them to help them move along their path to financial independence?
Yeah, no, that's a great question.
I've heard it before.
Yeah, that's good. No, I think it would just go back to what we talked about early on, and realize that money is not the goal or the source of your happiness or any of that. It's a tool to do something else that you want with your life. So, and as I mentioned before, like, we're pretty terrible at realizing what we want or what we want to accomplish or what we want to do or what makes us happy. So I think experimenting a lot when you're young, always tweaking and like removing things that aren't working and trying to sub in something else that may work. And obviously not being inefficient with your money, because inefficiency is just waste. But yeah, trying to master that relationship of money, time, and happiness, really. And it's way harder than it looks, and it's not any easier after FI, especially when you don't have that drive and motivation that you need to put food on the table, sort of thing. So yes, the FI will come if you master that equation, and then hopefully by the time you get there, you don't even really care, because you've mastered that whole happiness, time, money trifecta, and you're just cruising along, having a great time, doing exactly what you want.
That sounds like a good recipe to me, and I'm going to keep working on that for the rest of my life, because I know I'm never going to get there. But
same here. Yep.
But you know what? It's going to be a fun journey, and we're going to, here in the FIRE community, we get to chat with each other and have friends who are pursuing that exact same goal, with a lot of diversity around there. That's so cool about this music venture you're on, because everybody's got what matters to them and what's interesting to them, and part of FI is just getting to learn and explore alongside all your friends. So thank you for doing that.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, and it's always fun catching up with you. Hopefully next time we'll be back in a beautiful mountainous location together and not on Zoom, and everything will be back to somewhat normal again. And
I look forward to that.
Thanks, man.
Sounds good. Have a great trip. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to that interview with the Mad Fientist. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear from you in the comments section below. What did you think about it? Do you have any questions, any suggestions, any follow-up ideas? And if you're not subscribed yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the little bell so you don't miss anything. I have new videos that come out every single Friday morning, and I think you'll enjoy some of the ones coming down the line in 2021. And if you like interviews like this, I think you'll enjoy some of my other interviews here on the channel. There's a playlist that you can see in the description of the video below, and also in just a moment in the screen above me. You can click on that to listen to more interviews with people like John Schaub, with Mr. Money Mustache, and others who will help you on your journey to financial independence. Thank you so much for being with me today on Coach Carson TV, which is all about investing in real estate, achieving financial independence, and doing more of what matters. My name's Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach, and I'll see you next time.